I'm sort of tempted to stop for morning tea, but I wonder if it's we've got people here that are here for the particular item. So would you like us to do your item first? Yeah, okay, so we'll do the Natural Environment Recovery Program Quarterly Progress Report, and I'd like to invite Chrissy Williams and anyone else, Helen Beaumont, etc., to the table. And thank you for what is an extensive report, and we've decided that we're very keen to treat this as an opportunity to look at what we are doing as a council, and I know that the document doesn't have the statutory authority of a recovery plan being a recovery program, but we kind of want to use it as the opportunity that it is. So thank you very much for the detailed work, and perhaps if you'd like to take us through it. I think we're going to be moving some alternative recommendations to the staff recommendation there.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Councillors. Just like to summarise a few things to start with. This is a report that goes through the governance hierarchy, I guess you call it, of SERA, and ends up with the Recovery Strategy Advisory Committee, for which you have 3 members on. So that goes to that committee. It's then the report is released, the quarterly report, and then your staff report it to you. So that's actually your staff's report. So that goes to you and to the other strategic partners after it's been to the advisory committee. So that's the process. It does mean by the time you get it, it's a little out of date, and we apologise for that, but that we can't really help that because of the process it needs to go through. As you mentioned, Madam Mayor, it is it's not a regulatory document, the NERP, but I think that's got both that benefits and disbenefits. But the benefits, I think, probably outweigh the disbenefits in that it's much more flexible. We can do things under the NERP that you might not be able to do under other regulations. So, but I think you do have to remember that it doesn't have the power under the RMA, for instance. Remind you that the position that I hold is a joint position, so it's co-funded by Environment Canterbury, by the Christchurch City Council, Waimakariri District Council and Selwyn, so it's a joint position. I am domiciled at ECAN, but I don't represent ECAN solely, so, and I'm happy to be a conduit to ECAN staff, but I do think you need to remember it as a partnership position. At your meeting 3 months ago, where the previous quarterly report was presented to you, I wasn't here, but you did ask that community boards have a presentation on the NERP. We talked to the Combined Community Board Seminar last Monday, the 26th of May, and I'd just say that would be the most effective way of us to be able to access community boards rather than visiting all 8 Christchurch City community boards and all the Waimakariri and Selwyn community boards. So I hope you're comfortable with that. I do have a summary sheet of which I've got copies that each of the NERP projects, I gave an indication in which community board areas they applied, and I can leave those for you. One of the requirements of implementation of the NERP is to hold an annual stakeholders forum. So we've had forum during the development of the NERP and back in 2012. Our first annual forum will be on the 2nd of July, and any of you would be welcome to that. And we'll be doing a number of presentations where we present on some of the different projects, and those we don't have presentations on will have information for people to take away in hard copy. So that's being held the evening on the 2nd of July in the function centre downstairs. So just welcome you to that. 2 of the specific projects that I'm working alongside others on is the Waitakere Sanctuary proposal, which includes Travis Wetland and the area south of that, which is red zone land. There's a concept paper that we have on that, and again I have copies I can leave for you. And also the Flatwater Sports Lake, some discussions with Sport Canterbury, and also I've done some investigations in the possible technical information that would be needed for consenting a lake. I think with both of those projects, consideration of the future use of the red zone is critical to what happens with those. And the advice we're receiving from Sarah is that groups that are proposing these projects at this stage don't put too much energy, time or money into preparing detailed feasibility studies. So that the residential red zone decision is likely to be, it hasn't been announced, but likely to be a phased process and an iterative process. And until groups know that their project may be a possibility, they're being advised not to spend a lot of money on that. So it's thinking about the things that might be needed, but not necessarily doing the detailed work. So those are probably the comments from me. I don't know whether that Helen and Clive want to add anything at this stage, but we're certainly happy to answer questions between us.
Helen, did you want to?
I guess I should just add that for the council, a lot of the work over the last 3 months, of course, has been related to some of the land drainage recovery program work and also some of the infrastructure work that's being done through SCIRT. So for the City Council, our focus has largely been on those operational programs that keep running and with the City Environment Group. And we have maintained a watching brief, as it were, on things such as the Waitakere Sanctuary and the Flatwater Lakes and the other more recreational uses of the red zone.
I think that one of the concerns that we have as a council is that we kind of want to know that, you know, the land drainage recovery program and the SCIRT program of work are really taking on board the NERP and using it again as the opportunity to maybe address some of the environmental considerations at the same time as addressing some of our flooding potential.
Yes, and Terry Howes has asked SCIRT to put together a report that addresses both of those. So addresses how they integrate with the land drainage recovery program and with the natural environment recovery program.
Oh, good.
So that report was commissioned good 3 or 4 weeks ago, as I understand it, so it should be on its way.
Excellent. Oh, that should be helpful. Glenn, David, Yanni.
Thank you. I've got a couple of questions, and thank you for this. Obviously, the program covers a huge amount of work. Just wonder, Chrissy, in number 2, if I can ask about under the program in relation to investigate and monitor coasts and estuaries in the emerging issues where it talks about community participation to resolve planning approaches for coastal sediments. Can I ask your view about whether perhaps, and I know we're doing this through the district plan, but whether we're kind of socialising this enough with our communities, or we could lift it more or promote that conversation more?
Yeah. And again, I'm sure your staff can answer this probably better than I can, is that my understanding is both through the district plan review, but just more generally, there's community discussions happening around risk and their understanding. On Saturday, for example, a community organisation, the Estuary Trust, organised a discussion around the estuary edge and had Tonkin and Taylor and Helen Rouse from NIWA and people present on that. So the community is starting those discussions themselves. The information that we got from NIWA and from Helen Rouse, and I know Tony Moore and some of your staff have been thinking about this, it does need to be quite a lengthy process, and people need to have really good knowledge before they can express views. Otherwise you get probably ill-informed reaction coming from community. So it needs to be quite a long community process, and that's always difficult because you get people coming and going. But I understand that's happening. I know there's some students from university who've been looking at consultation around risk as well. So, but it's not a let's just go out and ask them once. It does have to be continual.
You. And if I could ask an entirely different question, it's in number 13 over the Flatwater facility. While I agree in the residential red zone, if something, for instance, was placed there, and I think personally Kerr's Reach needs to be widened from a safety perspective, that's a long-standing need. Could I just confirm that actually having a flat water facility there doesn't necessarily attend to the flooding problems that we have? That if you were going to do that, you need to actually have it further upstream. Is that correct?
I can. The flatwater facility is a recreational facility. It's not a stormwater pond. And that said, it could act as a stormwater pond, but you're absolutely correct in that the most effective ponding is that ponding high up in the catchment, such as we have in Cranford and Henderson's basins, and also up and around the Sticks. The opportunities really for stormwater treatment in the lower Avon are about water quality and less about water quantity. So less about flood control and more about the treatment of the stormwater. The flatwater facility and the location of it would obviously be subject to a lot more work and evaluation in terms of what it does to both the groundwater and the surface water in that area. And that's where the approach, as Chrissy has said, is that only concepts are being put forward at this point so that we can get the community can get an overview of what the options are before any decisions are made and then detailed design is done. So the technical feasibility has not been demonstrated, I guess, is what I'm saying.
And what Sport Canterbury has offered to do is to get the different sports codes together, flatwater sports codes like waka ama and dragon boats and kayaking and rowing, so that they can agree on what their wish is and what criteria they need. And just further to what Helen said is maintaining water quality and making sure that there's not weed growth in artificial lakes is one of the biggest issues. In both Eton Dorney and at Penrith, there's problems with weed and problem with water quality. And in an area that's currently silt, that's probably going to be even more difficult. So, and so if you start then adding stormwater into it, you're probably compounding that problem. So, I mean, it really is huge. The Pegasus Lake up in Pegasus Township is an artificial lake. But it's in sand. And it's maintaining a primary contract water quality standard, but it's quite a different substrate. It's all their stormwater is fed through sand filters before it goes into the lake and those kinds of things. So,
David.
Just a point of clarification under 3.2.2, the Tonkin-Taylor report, updated research. Are we saying that the report that we received a wee while ago is the one, or has there been further updated information? Talking about the Tonkin-Taylor report that was put out about
December,
4 months ago?
Just before Christmas.
Yeah, so there's no further updated?
No.
No, that's okay. I just wanted to clarify that point.
It's all right. It's still the one that you disagree with. But that's all right. That's all right. Yanni.
Yeah, I was particularly, just at a high level, there's a lot of actions in here, but what I don't see is what are the kind of indicators? So what are the targets? So how do we know if we're actually making a difference? Like, how do we know if we're reducing flood risk and restoring drainage capacity? How do we know if we're enhancing biodiversity? Are there any indicators that we have that you report against that we could understand to measure progress?
I have put an inordinate amount of thinking into this and talking with people who work in this field, both within Christchurch City Council and Environment Canterbury, about what suitable indicators would be that show both earthquake effects and show response by intervention or time. It is incredibly difficult when you're talking about the natural environment. Indicators tend to be over long time frames. They aren't often specific for what we're wanting the output in. They've been measured for other purposes in the past, so you haven't got good baseline data. So we've reached the point that we're not going to put out a report with a lot of indicators in it because we don't think it would add value. But if there's specific things that we think we can report on, like waste quantities, we've looked at E. coli in the rivers, but that's still just going up and down as it did pre-earthquake, we'll produce that information. But really, we don't think it's going to add value to produce information that tries to relate it to the earthquake and what we're doing. The timeframes are just far too long, and the environment is far too complex to be able to choose a single indicator to show that.
I've got a number of resolutions or recommendations, and I know staff have prepared some as well. The outstanding resolution around getting SCIRT to change its parameters, and I see on here that actually On project 5, I would like to move a specific recommendation that we instruct SCIRT that looking at possible treatment and alternative discharge options when repairing, replacing stormwater systems is not considered betterment. So the staff view is saying, well, the NERP view says it shouldn't be considered betterment, but SCIRT are saying that it is betterment. We're effectively the same people, although I think NZTA is probably the one group that's not quite on board with the NERP, but government is, ECAN is, we are. So given that we control, well, we should have majority control of SCIRT, can we just pass a resolution to instruct them to do that? Like yeah.
I don't know. I don't know that that's in order. So,
Right.
but let's take that
So
one offline.
what I really want is,
Can we deal with that? Let's do some work on that, and we can put it to the council meeting next week.
yeah, okay, so I think a report
out of the report of
next
this.
week. So the report that was talked about that Terry's doing, can we have that come to council next week? The problem I have as an elected member is every day I'm getting SCIRT repair notices that are not doing the things that you're talking about in here. This is the second report we've had on the NERP that has identified this as an emerging issue, but what I'm not seeing is any action to address it. And I just, I'm really worried that there's areas we know from the flooding that are adversely impacted that are not being addressed through SCIRT. And by the time we get any change to SCIRT, that money's being spent, and we're going to have to incur additional cost.
I wonder, Helen, if we could find out what the report that Terry has asked for is going to cover, because it may well cover that, and the timing of that report. I can take an action to do that, and then let councillors know. And I hear you would like to get it sooner rather than later.
Yeah. But if
So-
it's not going to be ready this meeting
Yeah.
next week, then perhaps the meeting after, so that it just gives
Yeah.
us a deadline to report by.
But it's a culture change. It's a.
No,
I don't understand
it's
what
a specific direction around what the definition of betterment is. And it actually isn't a decision that we get to take on our own, because the way the SCIRT program operates is that the horizontal infrastructure governance group will sign off on the work, but at the end of the day, it's Sarah that signs off on the final agreement about what work is done and what work isn't done.
So the request that was made previously, and again, I don't know if this report is addressing it, is what is the process to change the parameters of SCIRT? So that should be pretty straightforward. There should be a clearly defined process.
I'm gobsmacked that you can sit there and say it should be pretty straightforward.
Well, no, I mean, we've got an MOU, we've got some sort of agreement when SCIRT was established. There should be
It changed as a result of the cost share agreement with the horizontal
council
infrastructure
resolution.
governance group was set up, and it now has a new, that they're going through a process of, what's the word? Prioritisation. So, and they are trying to integrate the non-SCIRT work into the prioritisation project. So that's the priority that's going on there at the moment. So I don't think that they've turned their attention to expanding the definition of betterment. I actually take from the NERP advice is that it should not be regarded as betterment in the context of whether it's SCIRT or whether it's non-SCIRT. So it's actually not SCIRT, it's the horizontal infrastructure process. So people use SCIRT as the shorthand, but it's not the full story. It's the horizontal infrastructure definition of betterment. So I think you should take that as a separate action, Jane, and report back to us either at the next council meeting or the one after that. So, but that's the tolerance level for how long the council can wait.
Yep. Okay.
Yep.
It needs to happen. And I mean, the millions of dollars that have been spent every day, has anyone just done a very quick checklist around what we know for the land drainage to say to SCIRT, well, actually these areas in particular are sensitive?
I don't know.
Okay, the second question I had is, I would like for us to request government fund the establishment of independent task force to be proactive in looking at ways to minimise the exposure and reduce harm associated with the management of earthquake-related waste. So a number of us are really concerned about asbestos around and silica and the contaminated dumping, the lack of proactive enforcement, monitoring, consenting, and I think the task force worked really well with the flooding. So I know that this has been raised again. This is being raised previously as part of this report, but what I don't see is the action. So I would welcome staff advice over, we want to be more proactive in that space. We're really worried about the impacts on our city, and what out of this report is being done to address that, if anything.
I can address that. Anne Columbus is our representative on the Waste and Environmental Management team, and that's a joint team between ourselves, Selwyn, Waimakariri and the Canterbury Regional Council, and that's specifically looking at the management of waste post-earthquake in terms of looking at the issues for human health as well as the issues for the environment. And that is the team that has achieved a lot in terms of the recycling and recovery of a lot of that waste. And just last week there's been a new memorandum of understanding signed, and so this will be reported through to the Environment Committee, and that's for an overall program control group, and they call themselves the Combined Health and Environmental Hazards Program Control Group. For some reason their acronym is CHER, C-H-E-R. I don't know where they got their R from, but there it is. And that's with those same councils, so the Regional Council and our neighbouring district councils, but also includes WorkSafe New Zealand and Ngāi Tahu and the Canterbury District Health Board. So, and specifically includes those issues of asbestos and hydrocarbons and hazardous waste management and disposal. So all of those issues are being addressed in a coordinated way, and I've checked with Anne Columbus, and there should be a report on the agenda of the Environment Committee either in June or July. I'm not sure which meeting it's coming to, and that'll summarise the work of the Waste Environmental Management team and also this new Memorandum of Understanding for that overall control group.
So is anyone going back retrospectively and looking at the consents that have not been issued or the consents that have been issued, the work that was going to be undertaken by the contractors and whether it's actually being done properly or not? Because I know with the residential red zone, people are really concerned.
Yes, there's an extensive monitoring program, and they run approximately 100 monitoring visits per month at the moment, looking at specifically that. So and also responding to complaints where there are non-compliances with consents. So there's a lot of work being done in that space, and Anne Columbus will have a report for you on that I think will answer 90% of your questions and perhaps 150% of them. Actually, it might answer some others as well.
I think we want the community to have confidence that there is a robust system in place. What's happened in the media over the last few weeks have clearly shown that the existing arrangements are not working.
One of the big difficulties, of course, and you're right, there are some gaps in the legislation, if you like. One of the things that's very difficult to manage is do-it-yourself demolitions, particularly private household do-it-yourself demolitions. So, it's people who take a spade to their lino and ignore the fact that there's asbestos underneath it. And that sort of work being undertaken. That is very difficult to manage.
What we're hearing, in which this report, last time it was reported...
Yanni, the trouble is that this is a specialist area in the context of the whole report.
Okay.
I don't know that questioning in this session is going to lead us anywhere. I mean, we've already received advice. Anne Columbus is representing this council extraordinarily well. She's updating us, providing us with information. We got the information last week that was sent around with the latest that they could report on. As we've heard, there's a court case being held back as further investigations are being done by the department. Oh, it's not called that anymore. What's it called? WorkSafe.
WorkSafe.
So there are multiple layers of information. I personally met with the Medical Officer of Health last week because I wanted to have some reassurance around what was going on. I'm not entirely happy with the entire situation, but we've got to move on. So I don't know where the line of questioning is going to lead us.
What I was trying to understand, so this report not this one, the one that we got before, identified that as being an emerging issue. And what seems to have happened between then and now is, I
That a
guess,
lot of organisations
some
are
stuff,
doing a lot of work
but-
behind the
But
scenes.
that's what, I think the community need to have confidence that this issue is being addressed in a different way than it was previously.
That's correct,
And-
but we're not in a position to answer that question at the moment. There is further work that is being undertaken.
Yes, Anne Columbus will be able to answer that for
So
you.
if people are
Yeah.
worried about sites at the
Yeah,
moment,
I'm not going to take any more
Okay.
questions on it. We've got to move on. Phil, you're next.
Thank you. Your project 3 around reducing, restoring drainage capacity, and also taking into account your biodiversity projects. I just wondered how that is working out in terms of balance. Like I know, for example, there's a lot of trial dredging happening, or a significant amount, and clearance of creeks, and that's essential on an emergency basis. So downstream, how between, say, council and ECAN are we managing to keep a balance?
The City Council has got a 6 values approach, and drainage is one, ecology is one of the 6 values. It's always really hard balancing those two, and work that you can do to mitigate flooding may impact on the ecology. Dredging is one thing that's a benefit to both, though. It can increase the flood capacity, but at the moment there's so much sedimentation in the rivers that the invertebrates can't survive. So dredging can eventually get some invertebrates back. So, I mean, it's the same with riparian planting. That adds friction. It's the same with bridges. They can add friction, as you found in Dudley Stream. So I think it's accepting there's some balancing going on. There has to be, people need to be doing things deliberately, realising that it may impact on one of the other values that they're trying to achieve. And everyone gets caught deciding where to put the emphasis. So at the moment, the emphasis for you is definitely on flooding, but I don't think you've forgotten the ecology.
Thanks, Chrissy.
In the central city, there's been discussion about flood mitigation compared with the ecological improvement to the river, and they're working through site by site to find some compromise.
Right, thank you. And my other question really is around differences, say, on the peninsula in terms of water, and especially around drainage capacity. Because my understanding is that on the peninsula, ECAN have a stronger input. Can you perhaps explain the differences in terms of the jurisdiction there?
Yeah. Under, someone might have to remind me, some old Drainage Act from 1942 or 50, the delegation of looking after the city rivers was given to the Christchurch City Council, or whatever it was at that stage. The rivers in Waimakariri and Selwyn and Banks Peninsula are still under Environment Canterbury jurisdiction, but because Banks Peninsula is part of Christchurch City, there's both organisations are involved in those. It's a complex area because ECAN looks after activities on the surface of the water, but the City Council does things on the banks and on the river bottom. So the city delegation, it does change things within Christchurch City. Banks Peninsula, like I said, it's a shared responsibility, whether you're talking about stormwater off river or in river.
Chrissy, on project on 12, community gardens, local food production and urban forestry, is there any impediment whatsoever in anybody else's legislation that would in any way stop a food forest in Christchurch?
My understanding is that the impediment is around existing policies or approaches by your green space staff about
By
having...
ours, yeah.
But
nobody else is standing in the way?
I'm not aware of any.
Awesome.
Other cities are doing that. So.
Awesome. So nothing from ECAN or anything will, once we fix ours, nothing else standing in the way?
I haven't investigated that, but I wouldn't have thought so.
But ECAN hasn't got any...
No, I can find out though. Of course.
people in the flooding areas, because EQC is now going out and doing work that potentially has either already been done or partially done by this group?
I can't answer that. I'll hand over to...
I think that comes back to what this is, and this is an umbrella program, you know, looking to find synergies and opportunities and coordinate the work that's being done. And I think that question is much better directed to our land drainage recovery people who have been working closely with EQC and can probably provide you a much better answer than we could.
Does EQC have access to the information that this report will collate and
Yes, but they have it directly through the projects that are within this program. So they have it directly with the people managing those projects. So their relationships are at an operational level, if you like, rather than at this program level.
Okay, thank you.
And there is a lot of discussion about where natural hazards sits, and is it in the regional policy statement, and what goes through to district plans. So that, you know, that's just, you know, work in progress too. So, and remember that the RPS is a regional document; it's not just for Christchurch City. So we need to, Environment Canterbury need to be careful how they write things.
Right, well, that's all the questions. I won't deal with the motions now because I know that Councillor Johansson's got one and staff have prepared an alternative one which I've added to. So, but we don't need you here for what happens next. So thank you very much for a presentation, and I'll say we'll adjourn for morning tea. If we could be back here at 11:20, and if in that time, if there is any possibility of getting an agreed set of words for our resolution on this particular recovery program, then I'd be very, very grateful.